Hey, this is Brian. I'm going to run through a little bit of our hive setup and things that you may consider doing or repeating or not repeating, depending on your situation. These are the two hives that we started with. From the bottom up, we've got some CMU blocks, and then I put little ant moats on each corner because we were having ants when we were using the top feeders. Basically, they're a black plastic puck, and then they're in a peanut butter jar lid. And some people use oil on these, but I just use water. The oil kind of gets pretty nasty, and then the water, when it rains, it fills it up. So I just use a watering can every once in a while. If we have ant issues, then I put water in there. But we don't always have ant issues. It's usually just when we're feeding. As you can see, I do have the broodminder scales. I do like to see what's going on, since I decided to get some before I even started beekeeping. When I started buying equipment, I bought them because I wanted to know when the flows were, how each hive was doing, and how they were performing. It's helped out a lot knowing which hives have the most weight and which ones to potentially select for queen breeding from. I do have the scales, the humidity sensor, and the temperature sensors inside of the 4 larger hives that I have. Another thing that we have, our hives are sort of in the shade, so I've got Freeman bottom boards. The Freeman bottom boards are basically a screen bottom board, and then underneath, debris can fall through. This time of year I can't change it as much because the weather's so cold, it kind of builds up, but it helps you see where the bees are in the hive and where the cluster may be. And then you can also look at hive beetles that have dropped through here, and wax moth larvae, and even mites. And I'll do mite checks when it's warmer. A lot of these hive beetles usually are clustered in the corners, but for some reason the week where it was really cold here, they all just dropped and they were kind of all just scattered randomly throughout. So I'm not sure if the cold took care of them or if the bees were able to get them wrangled down there or not. But we do have ventilated ones, ventilated small hive beetle, or ventilated Freeman bottom boards. And I did put some smaller mesh on those so that the hive beetles couldn't actually enter through that screening. From there we have slatted racks. And the slatted racks will give them just a little extra room, so when it's hot and they're potentially bearding outside, this gives them some space to get inside the hive. So we do have some possums and some other critters that come through at night and potentially munch on the bees, so if they can be inside the hive, then they're not as aggravated. We did stick with 8-frame hives. I read Kim Flotham's book, The Backyard Beekeeper. I was originally going to do all mediums, but everything that you can buy, it seems like it comes in deeps. So the nukes, if you're buying a nuke, it's the same price between the mediums and the deeps, and you're getting about 3 inches more frame for each frame that you're getting. So if you're getting a 5-frame nuke, you're potentially getting 2.5 more frames of built-out comb and bees if you're getting deeps. So, and I also decided that the deep, if I'm going to feed my bees, I will feed them in the deeps, and I will not take any honey from the deeps, only from the mediums. So any of the deep frames potentially could have sugar water in their stores. I do overwinter in double deeps. There's a lot of different opinions out there and different options. This is just kind of what we do. I don't feed in the fall because a lot of these hives have more than 60 pounds of honey in them already. So I'm hoping that they'll eat through their own stores so that there doesn't have to be any sugar water fed unless I'm trying to help them build out comb or something in the spring. It's a little different than some people do, but the first year I did feed in the fall, and I even did sugar bricks in the spring, and they came out and had several swarms. I was able to capture all of the ones that I saw, but I'm hoping maybe this year they will be a little bit more of a gradual start so that I can keep things under control. moving up here, we have a clear inner cover. So this helps me see the bees in the wintertime, and I can look down through it and without breaking that propolis seal. So I can see if the bees are in the bottom box or if they've moved to the top box. As they move more to the top box, then they're starting to get through all of their stores and reserves. So if I do need to feed, which probably it wouldn't be until about February, then I can make that call when the time's right. So the difference between these two boxes is that this one has a medium because it has a 2-inch rigid block of insulation in the bottom of it, and that's just to keep the condensation potentially to the outside edge of the walls. Anytime I check in the wintertime, there will be no condensation on that clear inner cover, so that helps me get peace of mind that we don't necessarily have to have like a Vivaldi board or some sort of ventilation up there. As long as we can keep that moisture to the edges, it won't be dripping on the bees. And this is the same setup. It just has 1.5 inches and it actually fits underneath the cover. So I didn't put a medium box on it. It does have a little feeder shim, and I can look at those in just a moment. And these are basically the same setup. So, and again, I went with 8 frame because of Kim Flautum's book, but they are lighter. It looks like everything would probably have been cheaper if it was 10 frame. A lot of places sell the hives and the boxes, the 8 frame and the 10 frame, for the exact same price, and then potentially you're getting 2 extra frames if you're buying the hive body with the frames. So that's just a choice, a decision somebody has to make. We chose 8, and that's the direction we're going with. My neighbor used to keep bees, and he actually left me 1 box that kind of sparked my interest of getting into beekeeping, and it happened to be an 8 frame medium box. So that started us down that path, and we stuck to it. So these are Man Lake boxes. The quality of the Man Lake boxes that we got from the beginning compared to last year, it's gone down quite a bit, but get whatever you can get. Hilco makes great boxes, really tight joints. Better Bee makes great boxes. The Freeman bottom boards, we got those from Heartwood, which is eheartwood.com. It's the only place I was able to find those with that type of quality, and they're made out of cypress, so they should last us a good long time. I did put a pad down, and it has a weed barrier underneath of it on the original 2 hives. That helps see how many bees drop out in front of your hives and everything. As I added on, I didn't have as many pavers, so that I just put the weed cloth down, and then I also have a rack that's for nukes, and it just has some weed barrier under it as well. Now, being in the city, we have a little bit different things we have to deal with here. So these actually are about 3 feet to the fence from the entrances. So I was hoping that the bees would fly up and over, but what actually happens, since these are actually facing north, they fly kind of between the hives, but they still fly up. So there's no disturbance with us when we're in the backyard. The thing about putting them this close to a fence, they almost have to be facing north, because what you want is the sun coming from the south heating the box throughout the winter. If this was the south, the sun would be blocked in the wintertime. Even if the sun came in the summertime, in the wintertime the angle would be so low that this wouldn't get any heat on it. So as long as your boxes have access to the south to get warmed, I think that they're going to be fine. I do see the boxes that are closer to us that are painted green, they do start foraging sooner. I don't know if that's because they're closer to the east or if it's because of darker box. But also the nukes that we have here, they forage a little bit earlier, but they're also facing east. When we get things going, we put a queen castle on the end, and it has an entrance both directions, and then also to the south. But we have enough equipment to hopefully have enough resource hives to have a support hive for each one of these, and then if we need to help out any other beekeepers, we can sell those nukes or potentially combine them. These nukes are pretty large. We did a 3 deep on these, so they do have 15 frames. There are no scales or no sensors on these. These are just purely resource. So all of my energy is going into the larger hives, but I'm still trying to keep these alive for resource purposes. This queen in here is the overwintered queen from last year. And this nuke on the right, it also has a medium box, and Hilco has some medium boxes that are reasonably priced. And we were doing that more to help build out comb. One thing you'll find is the reason you don't get a lot of honey your first year, it's not necessarily because the bees won't make it, it's because you don't have the comb. So every year after that you build and you have more and more comb, then they don't have to draw it out. All they have to do is fill it and then kind of get the moisture out of it so that they can cap it. So as the years go by, this is the end of our second year, and they drew out more comb last year than the previous year because we have more hives, plus we were using some of the resource hives to build out comb. But the more drawn out comb you have, the more they can store honey and not have to worry about building it out. That's most of our setup. Like most people, I would always recommend having some 5-frame nukes. And then if you ever have any swarms, you could potentially put them in these smaller boxes that usually you're going to start with 1 deep and then go as they build out. These top 2 on this second were filled with honey, and this one was mostly honey. And this one was completely honey, and then the outside edges of this was honey the last time that I inspected. I hope the planes don't mess with the audio too much. But these also have moats on them. I just used the bottom of a plastic bottle, and the rainwater kind of fills them up, and it's just a little plastic puck that we get from our work. But I would think a hole saw and a piece of wood, and just sticking a piece of wood in there would probably be enough to create that so that it spaces off from the top. I also have a chunk of solid surface sampling in there too. That's it. I'm going to take a peek inside and kind of show you the difference of what's going on in there. Just another thing to mention is the top of our hives. We have some chloroplast. It sort of hangs over. I noticed that Jim at Vino Farms had something like that at the entrance of his, and even Frederick Dunn has an awning. Basically, I'm trying to create the same situation so that it hangs over so that water's not dripping on the entrance, so that the bees can come out even if it's raining and water doesn't get in the hive. And then I just ended up doing it on the back too, because in the summertime this can cast a shadow, so this can be a little bit in shade because the sun is at such a steep angle. It also hopefully keeps the boxes out of the weather a little bit so that they can last a little bit longer. I'm going to go ahead and take this top off and kind of show you what's going on inside these upper boxes and take a peek inside of the bees and see where they are. This brick is on here too. This keeps things from blowing off, but you can also put it in different orientations to denote if you have an issue or not. If you have an issue, usually you put it up. I always put mine this way. If they're smooth sailing, good to go. If there's something else I need to check, I'll put it sideways. But if it's queenless, I'll put it upright. I forgot to mention, we also do use the Reflectix, which doesn't have a lot of R value. It actually has, it's the radiant barrier that reflects the heat back in that you're getting with this. Just a little bit of air as insulation is not a huge R factor. It's probably exaggerated a little bit too through the manufacturer. And then in here we have two inches of rigid insulation. Now it is a pretty warm day, so I do expect the bees to be up top, and I'm seeing that they are up. So it's when they're clustered to help us see where they actually, if they're up high or down low, taking care of her. So that reflection is not really helping, so let me come around the other side. That doesn't help at all. Let's try this. Straight down. Alright, see if we can get this there. Get that without the reflection. So, quite a bit of bees up here. So, population is still good. It looks like they're accessing all the frames. Everything seems to be good. So, this allows me to see them without breaking the propolis seal. So, I really enjoy these clear inner covers for the wintertime. Oh, there's a girl right there. She's bringing in pollen today. I believe I saw some Camilla flowers blooming in our neighborhood, and they're collecting this. If I can get this to focus. She's probably a little confused because I took the top off. They're probably orienting to that. See if I can move her on, and then we'll get things back on there. And that feels really warm, so set you guys back up here. Get this back together. And again, this is just setting down in here. It sets off a little bit, lines up with the inside of this one. The inner cover has no holes in it. It does have notches on both sides. I've tried it with the entrances open and with them closed. They propolize them shut. So I ended up putting some screen in here to prevent any small hive beetles from getting in and out, and it also helps them propolize that shut. But they've propolized all those entrances shut, and that's what you're seeing here is extra propolis to squeeze through the entrances. That's your main insulations in there, and you can put anything in here. This could be fiberglass insulation if you really wanted it to. Probably be really itchy, but you could do something like Roxol insulation, or just the rigid insulation is easy to store and it's easy to pack away. Being a backyard beekeeper, I don't have a ton of storage space, so I've got to think through how everything is going to end up, or where everything's going to end up in the shed when I'm storing it. So. This hive is not a man lake hive. This is actually one of the Galena Farms newbie hives. Not a lot of people like the fact that these are made in China. Not a huge fan myself, but the boxes are made well. They're made out of Douglas fir. They are edge joined, so it'll be interesting to see how they hold up. But I did use wood filler on these and glued the face. So when you're gluing them, you don't just glue the joints, you glue the end grain too, and you can plug that so the moisture doesn't get in there. And then I painted those. I would highly recommend priming 2 coats and then painting 2 coats, just so you get the longevity out of your boxes. Some of these other boxes, I originally put them together, and I was reading that some people did not glue them together because they use screws so you can take the ends off. But if it rots, I'm going to have to buy a new box anyways, so there's no reason not to. So I ended up getting an extra hive so that I can swap boxes out and re-glue them. But stuff like this probably should have wood filler on it, and then everything glued together. So I'm going to take these boxes apart, slowly cycle through, and get them primed and repainted and glued and wood fillered and everything. So hopefully they'll last me as several seasons. And take a peek in this one just because we're here. Oop, this one's kind of stuck in there. There we go. So this oil I have to change it out about once a year in the summertime. But this is just an interesting observation that I've come across here when these gaps in these boxes. This wasn't here when winter started. It looks like they're all propolis shut, but it almost seems like they keep shoving more and more propolis into the gaps, and it actually opens the gaps up. When I came into spring last year, these little gaps that are probably 30 seconds, maybe not even an inch right now, were 3/16. They were over almost a quarter of an inch. They just kept pushing them and pushing them, and then they eventually got big enough that the bees could actually come through them, which was crazy. So when I did my first inspection, I had to scrape the propolis off the top edges here. But it's pretty interesting. Chickens are helpful. You have them scrape around and potentially keep out the small hive beetles. We haven't lost any hives to small hive beetles. We did lose one hive. It was just really weak. It had some small hive beetles in it, and it also had some wax moths in it. The past 2 years, sort of September, October, we always get a usurpation swarm, and they always seem to land on the first box. They seem to land right here at the top, and if this is closed off, they'll just hang out there. And then I know that's an African bee quality, but I also wonder if there's a wild hive somewhere that just got overcome by small hive beetles or something that's just absconded. Maybe it's not necessarily African traits, but maybe they just left because they just absconded. But why would they come into this? I guess that would be the African trait that people were discussing. But I usually try to capture that swarm, and none of them have made it over the winter. They've been so small, they've been the size of a softball maybe, so they don't have time to build anything up. And the first year we found the queen, the second year the same thing happened and we didn't find a queen. So it was just a bunch of bees that came this direction, and some of them got let in, some got killed at the entrance, and then when I found them I put them in a box so they could have a shot, but they didn't make it till September, but they didn't make it till October. So, and then we also had small hive beetle larvae and some wax moth when they were dying out. So that was just an issue because there weren't enough bees. It wasn't an issue that small hive beetles were too strong or the wax moths were too strong. It's usually a sign that the hive is weakened. So that's it. So that's where we are for this year.